Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining. This is the October 12th webinar of the Health Policy Committee for the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference. I am Ellen Andrews, Health Policy Consultant to the committee. Our chairs are Representative Lisa Miller of Maine and Paula Roy, who is Executive Director of the Delaware Healthcare Commission. Today we're hearing from representatives of the New Hampshire Transitions and Caregiving Program. This program won a CSG Innovation Award at our annual meeting in August. This unique program moves caregiver support resources and program control from the state to the local level and back to families. We're going to hear from Kathy Crepeau, who has worked at the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services since 2003, managing the New Hampshire Family Caregiver Support Program. In addition, Kathy provides caregiver support, education, and leadership training in New Hampshire through the ServiceLink Resource Center, New Hampshire's Adult and Disability Resource Center. Under Kathy's leadership, over 500 families have been served under the Transitions and Caregiving program that will be highlighted today. Kathleen Oddie is the Director of the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services for the state of New Hampshire since 2007. The Bureau shares leadership within New Hampshire in developing and funding long-term supports and advocating for elders, adults with disabilities, and their families and caregivers. The Transitions in Caregiving program has been an integral program in supporting the state's rebalancing effort, as well as providing much-needed support for family caregivers. There's some housekeeping. If you're listening on the phone, remember to input the audio pin that should be visible on your screen if you want to be able to talk and ask questions. We will be keeping everyone on mute until the speakers are finished, and then we'll have time for questions. To ask a question, you can either raise your hand or you can type your questions into the question pane text box on your screen at any point in the webinar. And a video of this webinar will be posted online after today. So I will turn it over to Kathy and Kathleen.
Very good. Ellen, thank you very much for this opportunity, and we would like to express our appreciation to the Council of State Governments for allowing this opportunity to be shared with you of our New Hampshire experience in Transition and Caregiving program. The Transition and Caregiving program is something that we in New Hampshire take very personally. We recognize that 80% of all informal caregiving is provided by family members or an informal caregiver, and we want to celebrate that. And our program was designed based upon the fact that we recognize that family members and informal caregivers could actually help us in the rebalancing effort of our state to give people options from considering institutional care to that of home and community-based care. We also have chosen the Ayn Rand quote because we felt as if it really exemplified some of our early efforts about taking the road less traveled and taking new roads with new steps, armed with nothing more than really our own vision of what caregiving could be in our state. The previous model that we had in New Hampshire was that of centralized state-level government. Caregivers who previously wanted to receive a respite stay or receive educational support contacted the state office personnel, and really it was a provider-driven network. It was one that the consumer found had found that red tape was part of the process, and it really did not afford itself to listen to individual needs of family members or to provide personalized services. It was really considered to be a rubber stamp process where we received an application, we found it to be eligible, and we stamped it and went forward from there. What we recognized is that this is an emotional situation for our family members and that we needed to look at the way we provided services and care. So we looked at what could be a greater support for our family members and recognized too that they needed not only the care for themselves and their loved ones, but also the support from their community. And ServiceLink Resource Center was mentioned in the first part of the introduction for Kathy Crepeau. ServiceLink Resource Center in New Hampshire has been an integral partner as well as with the Institute on Disability. Again, with all states recognizing that they need to stretch their existing resources and to work collaboratively, we began in this process. So I'd like to actually turn this presentation over to Kathy Crepeau so that she could begin to explain the building blocks of change for this program.
as Kathleen mentioned earlier, what we had previously was sort of a rubber stamp process. We had caregivers fill out applications. If they met the eligibility criteria, they could be granted paid-for respite services. And that was pretty much it. And there was definitely a need to change this model because when you look at it, we weren't really serving this group of people. We figured they were a very underserved population. And when you recognize that most family members provide 80% of long-term care, there had to be a change in this. So we decided that we needed to be more one-on-one support and more comprehensive supports for family caregivers out there. With the nursing home diversion project grants, we sat down and looked at that as a possible seed money to really change the way we were providing support to family caregivers in New Hampshire. What we had in existence was the Service Link Resource Centers. They're statewide. Matter of fact, New Hampshire is one of the first states in the union to have a statewide resource network of the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. So within the Service Link network, we developed a role and a job description for what we call caregiver resource specialists. These are individuals that would work one-on-one with family caregivers in the state. That began part of the system's change. So we wanted to provide supports at the local level. Rather than caregivers sending an application into the state office as a single out to the local level to the Service Link Resource Centers. And the caregiver specialists would have more authority in offering services to family members. So the funds, the 3E funds we had for respite services, all the authority from the state office to the local Service Link. So each Service Link site had their own budget for respite services. Another thing we wanted to change was to have the process more person-centered. I think that's becoming a sort of a buzzword out there, looking at our person-centered process. But not only person-centered, we wanted to take it to the next level and have it consumer-directed. In other words, the caregiver can choose how their services are provided, when their services are provided, who's going to provide the services. And we felt that was a really big jump from what we had been doing before. Within that, we developed like a budget worksheet for the caregivers. The caregiver resource specialist acts sort of a coach. It was not a case management model. It was a caregiver specialist would sit and meet with the caregiver. They would do an assessment. We developed an assessment tool. Within that, they were starting to get a better idea of what was going on in the family and the supports that they could provide. We're working through the Aging and Disability Resource Centers, information referral, caregivers could get connection to local resources. Again, the comprehensive assessment of the caregiver's needs, options counseling, long-term support planning. We actually developed a well-being plan. We originally looked at it as a support plan, but that sounded too clinical, so we looked at a well-being plan. You know, what is it that you need for your own personal well-being? One-on-one support, eligible family caregivers receive a budget to purchase respite and other services. It wasn't just respite because they could look at assistive equipment, home modifications, and a variety of other things that can complement the care that they were providing. Again, the family caregiver would direct their services. We call it caregiver-directed services. Ability to hire family members or friends to provide respite care services. Service Link sites with the caregiver especially have access to multiple funding sources for respite services. And this was another a big part of the project because we have the Title III Family Caregiver Support Program funds, but we also have state-funded ADRD Alzheimer's disease and related dementia respite dollars as well, which was previously contracted out to agencies around the state. But in order to access it, caregivers would have to go to that site and apply there. So basically, we took all respite funding sources and pulled it under one umbrella. So the caregiver, or specialists, when they sit down with a family caregiver and listen to where the needs are, they can pick and choose from multiple funding sources, service for them, thereby giving them a more comprehensive set of services. We brought in the evidence-based program, Powerful Tools for Caregivers. I think we were the first ones in New England to bring that in. As of this date, we've actually run 3 class leader trainings, and there is actually a class leader in every county in New Hampshire now as a result of that, and classes are going on all over the place now. That has been tremendously good. Again, the development of plan for the caregiver's own well-being, access to support groups, and Alzheimer's specific training. Those are just the basic components of the program. We'll get into it a little bit more. Again, we were looking at multiple funding sources. The Administration on Aging provided the seed money for the systems change, so we could just change the model entirely. Again, we're using the Title IIIe Family Caregiver Support Program dollars for the respite funds and other services, and the State General Fund's EDRD respite dollars. Next slide is a chart on who are the family caregivers. As part of the assessment, we actually incorporated 4 validated tools, sort of an underlying research project, and we're starting to collect quite a bit of data on the caregivers. Now, this is just a small sampling that you're seeing on a chart here, but it gives you a pretty good idea of who the family caregivers that we are serving. And as you notice, like a very high percentage are %, are the wives, 28% daughters, 3% nieces. As you see, it's still pretty much a woman's issue, although we are seeing more and more men becoming family caregivers out there. This is just more of data as that goes along with the previous chart. We provide care for, which is very interesting. As part of this project, what we were trying to do was develop a cost savings measure. That originally when we first started doing this, but the target population we were seeking were caregivers of older adults who are at risk of nursing home placement and spend down to Medicaid. So it really was the cost savings. If we could delay or prevent nursing home placement for that core group, annual income in this chart, it looks like we are hitting that target group. This is the annual income of the care recipient, 0 and 20,000 a year, 54%, 20,000 to 40,000 a year, 35%. Are reaching that target population. If any one of these had gone into our nursing home, they would have spent down very quickly. This is the data that backs up the previous chart. We didn't have the charts in the original presentation we did in Portland, but it's always nice to have a chart that really captures the visuals of the numbers. I don't know. To me, it has more impact.
As we're waiting for the next slide, what we want to talk about going forward is the personal approach. And I think that was one of the attributes of this program, was that we really felt as if we had a connection with those people who were involved in the caregiver program.
So part of the program is getting to know the family caregiver. As you remember, in the previous model, they filled out an application, they sent it in. There was no one-on-one support. Now, a caregiver specialist goes to the home, they make an appointment with the caregiver, and they sit down with them, and they really get to know the individual. It's very one-on-one. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from the Service League side saying that, talking to somebody on the phone versus meeting them face-to-face is two very, very different scenarios. You can get some information on the phone, but when you're sitting at the kitchen table with them face-to-face, all of a sudden you're starting to gather quite a bit more information that you ever would have gotten over the telephone. As they like to say, they're using their third ear during the assessment. Their home environment tells a story. We have a gentleman who does class, and he talks about gathering information before you even get into the house. And this is something that we've trained the caregiver specialists on, is look around the environment. When you park your car, look around the neighborhood. Are there flags out? Is it a homey atmosphere? Are there pathways between houses? The front door, does it look like it's ever been used? Are there newspapers piling up outside? Or are there signs of, a yard well-tended, or a yard that may be overgrown and perhaps they haven't the, physical capability of keeping it up anymore? So you're starting to gather lots and lots of information before you ever enter the home. And then once you get in the home, looking to see if there's pictures on the wall. Are there family involved? Is the place spare? Does it pass the sniff test? All these variety of things that you're just starting to gather before you even talk to the individual. Getting to know the family dynamics, who's involved, and all these sort of things that are part of the assessment. Stressors in the family. Sometimes family dynamics can be very stressful. And listening. Said, things that they're picking up as a part of their assessment. Are there fears? Are there big stressors or big concerns in their lives? We mentioned Maslow's triangle or Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Often when the caregiver specialists go in, they're hearing a lot of things, but what they really are targeting on is what are the immediate concerns of the family. Those are taken care of. Sometimes you can get into the additional layers of other supports that they need. Whatever can fit their particular situation. The next slide here, you see 3 photos. These are real caregivers that we've served in the program. The first one is Sheila Shea. She's been a caregiver for her 82-year-old mother, Lucy, for the past 5 years. We have a wonderful video of her talking about her experience. Sheila has kids at home that are still in school. She moved her mom in with her about 5 years ago. She lives in, they have like a mother-in-law apartment downstairs. She's completely blind. She has diabetes. She requires insulin shots. She suffered a stroke a couple of years ago. She has no use of the left side of her body, and she requires assistance with all activities of daily living. She is a very high level of care. The kids help in Grammy's care, as they call her. They even help with the insulin shots, and it's become quite a family affair. And as Sheila often says, if it wasn't help for the support from this program, her mom would definitely be in a nursing home. I promised their mom that they would not place her, that they were going to do everything they could on their end. At home and with family, with people who love her and care for her. George Cheney is 82 years old, very, very sweet gentleman. He's with their rescue dog, who's a greyhound. He is currently caring for his wife, Claire. Claire is 73. When we interviewed him, his wife was in the hospital again. She's had multiple hospitalizations. And this is kind of an interesting situation where they switch off being primary caregivers. About a year or so ago, George was actually the care recipient, and his wife, Claire, was taking care of him. He has multiple medical conditions of his own. This is a couple, they have some resources, and they've done a wonderful job of making their home as accessible as possible. It's a wonderful house on a lake, and they didn't want to move, so they did the best they could to make it accessible. There's actually a stair lift that goes from the basement where you drive your car into up to the main level of the house. And we have this funny clip of it shows the groceries going up the stair lift onto the main floor and how they use everything to the max. But they definitely needed one-on-one support, and Brenda Daly, who's our caregiver specialist, touches base with them frequently. Sometimes having that one-on-one support, not even respite services, but just having a connection with another individual and knowing they can have somebody that they can, rely on in times has made a big difference for them, and they continue to remain at home. Last picture is Celeste and her mom, Marie, character. Marie was actually in a nursing home. She has Alzheimer's. She's well advanced. She's a very lively, sociable person, but when she was placed in a nursing home, she stopped singing. The world kind of caved in on her, and Celeste was very worried about her mom. Was no longer the vibrant, singing, sociable mom that she knew. So with the support of this program, she was able to take her mom out of the nursing home, bring her back home, and with the additional help, she's able to keep her mom at home. And if you saw the video, Mom breaks out into Broadway song, and it's just like she got her life back, and she's with her family, and she's happy, and the family feels like they can keep her at home with the supports that they have. We did our presentation in Portland. We also brought up the story of the one woman in the Keene area. She's caring for her husband. He has Parkinson's and other conditions. But the guy loved to read. He would read hours on end. But the unfortunate fact of that was the wife had to sit there and literally turn the pages in the book page by page so he could read. And it monopolized hours of her time. Under this program, because it's consumer directed, we kind of thought out of the box a little bit. And the Servicing Resource Center says, well, you know what? Why don't we use the funds to get him a Kindle? Hallelujah. Now he could sit there and read to his heart's content. Even in spite of his Parkinson's, he can press the button to turn the pages, and his wife has a little bit of time to take care of other needs in the family. I don't know of any other program that would allow you to do something like that, but the nice part about this program, it looks at the needs of the individual, and you have an opportunity to be really creative on ways you can support the caregivers and the care recipients. And the upshot of this story is the caregiver not only got some respite time, but her husband could be more independent. So these are just some of the stories that have come out as a result of this project. Next page. Part of the project is understanding the life goals and the value system of the family caregiver and their family, because it really is a whole family. Short-term and long-term planning. Some of them are all of a sudden faced with looking at what's coming ahead. Sometimes the caregiver specialists sort of help advocate for the caregiver with other family members. They know what their parents are going through. You know, sometimes they're a proud generation and they don't want to bother their kids. They've got their own lives and their families and everything's fine, but sometimes getting the family involved is a part of what they do. Caregiver specialist is become an integral part of the long-term care system. I would say very valued members of our team. Yes. Outcomes. So some of the things that we're seeing as a result of the project is more streamlined access to services for caregivers statewide, from the tippy top of New Hampshire to the Canadian border to the south end along the border of Massachusetts, where this model is now available statewide in New Hampshire. Other things that have happened as a result of this is we were able to pass legislation for the first time forward for us. Other populations had legislation, but this one program did not. Validates the role of family caregivers. Development of partnerships. We've developed many, many partnerships as a result of this, and more agencies are working together. Not talk about our financial services manager, the agency that we contract to provide the financial management services of the budgets for services for caregivers, but they're one of the area agencies. They serve the population of the developmentally disabled, and they have been using a consumer-directed model for 10 years prior to us contracting with them, and they really helped us in developing this new process on behalf of family caregivers, a totally different population, different set of needs, but it really was a family approach. We work with the Institute on Disability, the Service Link Network. Other agencies are getting involved. We have others who are advisors on our committee. That has become a model for other programs. I think currently, right now, I think we have 1 or 2 individuals under we're piloting the consumer-directed option for this Medicaid population, which is totally new to the Bureau. So it's based on the success of working with family caregivers in consumer direction. We are looking at rolling it out to other populations in the state. So savings. Oh, this is always a good one. Within the first couple of years of the project, we've served over 500 family caregivers. It's actually quite a bit higher than that since this presentation. And these are family caregivers who meet the clinical eligibility, who are caring for an individual who meets the clinical eligibility for nursing home placement in New Hampshire. In other words, they need significant assistance with at least 2 ADLs. They can no longer be left alone. Majority of the individuals we have served would spend down to Medicaid within 1 to 6 months of placement. Looking at income and assets, they're right. Average cost of nursing home per month in New Hampshire is about $3,500. That is Medicaid rate. If you look at $3,500 a month, 500 families, it equals a cost savings of $1.5 million in 1 month alone. Do the math. Just a small amount of funds, supports, and services to family caregivers who are actually fulfilling the wish of the person they're caring for to keep them at home is a significant cost savings to states and counties in nursing home placements and costs there in Medicaid. So we think this is a really good investment in the long-term care population. As we're seeing that the number of older adults are continuing to rise every year. The latest figures I saw by 2050, individuals who reach the age of 65, 42% will live to be age 90. But none of them are always in the best of health, and often we rely on family members to provide the care over the long term. Not very many people have long-term care insurance and what have you, so it really does depend on family members for this level of support. So we feel this model is very sustainable over the long term. Jefferson says, a wise and frugal government
To conclude our presentation this morning, we just would like to thank you for taking part. Just would like to summarize that the state of New Hampshire has felt as if this program, the Caregiver Transitioning Caregiving Program, is actually served as an investment in our state. It's been certainly an investment in our caregivers, those people who tirelessly provide care in our state to those people that they love and that they've made promises to. Additionally, it also provides an investment into the person who's receiving the care because they ultimately receive some of the benefits from this program. We also have made a committed investment to the long-term care process, allowing people to have choice and decisions in their long-term care needs and services. And also, and I do put this last, there is a benefit to our state as it relates to our state budget. We do feel as if investing in family caregivers and informal support for caregivers has really allowed people to remain at home longer. Part of our process in this particular program has been a research project working with the University of New Hampshire, the Institute on Disability, to confirm that those people who have undergone this program felt as if it had benefited them, number one, and number two, that it had delayed institutional care. That research will actually conclude in November of 2010, and it is our hope that by January, February, we will have some preliminary findings on that research project. To summarize, I do feel as if the state of New Hampshire has recognized that personal touch is so necessary in state government that we should not go away and from those very values that have actually created our state, which is to recognize individual dignity and also the opportunity for choice. We've utilized our community services and our community programming by including caregiver supports from our Aging and Disability Resource Center. And then also we want to conclude by saying we really appreciate and value the efforts and the support that family caregivers have given to us, the state of New Hampshire, as we've developed this program. So with that being said, we'd love to turn it over for questions if there are any, and certainly be available to serve as a resource if you have questions in the future.
Well, thank you, Kathleen and Kathy. This is really inspiring. Unfortunately, we had some audio issues, and I know that one piece that legislators on the line will want to hear about is one of the outcomes that you have on your slide is legislation passed on behalf of family caregivers of older adults, but we didn't get to hear what that legislation was.
Very good. Basically, we recognize, and I'll start the process and then turn to Kathy to complete my conversation. But we recognized that in our statutes we did not have legislation that actually recognized how family caregivers are part of the solution to long-term care issues in our state. And while there was no financial impact, there were certainly no dollars committed by the state for this new legislation. It put into place that we felt as if the current revenue that we receive from the federal government by way of the AOA, the Administration on Aging funds, were so important that we wanted to recognize that. So again, there was no financial impact to this legislation. It was basically legislation that recognized the value and the importance of family caregiving in our state and how important it is in the continuum of services for our seniors. And Kathy, you may want to add a little more to that.
I think what you said is spot on. I would just reiterate what you said. We just felt it was important that we had legislation on the books for once to support family caregivers. It's a little while, but we got it through.
Yeah, and our legislatures are they recognize that education is important, not only for caregivers so that they can understand where their stress points are, but also to recognize this in the eyes of the legislators, because many times we come before them perhaps with budget reductions, and they must weigh the value of family caregiving as it relates to the long-term care process. And we felt as a state that this gave credence to the importance of family caregivers.
Well, that's great. We actually have one of your legislators on the line, Lori Harding, and then we also have our chairs and some other folks. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask a question. Everyone should be off of mute right now.
Ellen, can you hear me? This is Lori.
Yep.
I just wanted to comment on, I'm Representative Harding. I represent Lebanon, New Hampshire, the west coast of New Hampshire. And I just wanted to comment on Kathleen Audie's comment about the legislation that was passed this spring. So much of what we do in Concord involves a process of education in addition to passing good health policy. And I really saw the legislation that was brought in having to do with family caregivers is really an opportunity to talk about what was really going on in the state. And I think the Transition and Caregiver program has been exceptionally meaningful to families as well as other providers who take care of seniors. I'm a nurse, I work in home care, and I know we've had one or two clients up in this area who've benefited from the Transition and Caregiving program, and in some cases it's been adding a piece of equipment, a ramp, or providing respite for a family caregiver over a weekend, or in some cases it's been adding another day a week of caregiving so the caregiver can go to a support group. That's always been a major challenge, is trying to get family members out to support groups because there's no opportunity for the care for the loved one at home. I was wondering, Kathleen and Kathy, whether or not you might be able to categorize some of the ways in which the funds get used. What percentage might be used on additional caregivers for respite, or how much money might actually be used to provide another day of the week when the family caregiver might be able to go out and take a class, or how much might be used for equipment to make a home more accessible?
All right, this is Kathy. Traditionally, most of them use it for respite. I think the higher percentage is used for in-home respite. In other words, an agency or an individual coming in to take care of the care recipient so the caregiver can get out. That's always been the highest percentage. The next would be adult day, would be the second highest.
Yeah.
Respite facility, not so much. Chore services are big, particularly when we have really snowy winters here in New Hampshire, and using chore services for snow plowing ranks pretty high. We've done some stair lifts. We've done a couple of wheelchair ramps. Lifeline is the big one, those emergency response systems. It is all over the place. It really is based on the individual. Shower chairs, transfer benches, variety of different things. Transportation is also used quite a bit. As you know, most of New Hampshire is rural, and just having somebody drive them from place to place, to doctor's appointments, or even to the grocery store for older caregivers who themselves don't drive is a big deal. So it really is, and it is very much consumer directed. So it's really based on the needs of the individual. And our philosophy all along has been, we don't know what you need. You're the biggest authority on what you need in your life to keep, keep yourself going, and what it is that would get you out of the house and what you need to do. So it really is all over the place.
I think that's a great question too, and I think Kathy has kind of talked about the categories. One of the things I just like to add to the conversation is the intangible benefits of this program that I think are just equally as important. We will know more when our research is complete, but we hear from our caregivers that they hadn't taken the time to do an inventory on what is their triggers for burnout. This process has allowed them to educate themselves and their family on the vocation of caregiving, and they're now able, through the education and the powerful tools for caregiving educational piece, to recognize when they need help. And that actually falls in, then they recognize they need help, and then that's when they ask for the assistance with the respite, the adult medical day. So it really is a tangible, intangible component to this program.
The other questions that will come up, and I think, Laura, you did mention it, is how much money are we talking about per person? The budgets to the caregivers, depending on their need and their own, informal resources and their own finances, the budgets can range anywhere from $100 to up to $3,000 per year, per state fiscal year. So it's pretty broad and open-ended, and the service-link sites do have the spending authority to authorize those funds, for the individual. The caregiver doesn't see the funds directly. It's actually paid-for services, but they pick what it is they need.
That's a question I had. This is Ellen. This is actually a lot of responsibility for, first I just want to say I love the Kindle story. That's phenomenal. And I want to get an assessment myself for my triggers for burnout. I think that sounds fun. But this is a lot of responsibility for caregivers. I mean, you may know that you need a shower stool, or you may know that you need respite services, but to go about figuring out when you're busy and you're close to burnout, where you get those and what's a reasonable amount to pay, is there help for people in actually purchasing the services?
That's what the caregiver specialists help them with. They're like a coach. They sit down and say, we've done the assessment, and I've heard you say this, this, this. Are these, big needs for you? If they are, they have, because they work through the Service and Resource Centers, they're INR specialists. They know what's in the community. They know what's around. They know who the providers are, and they can coach them through the process. So they're not alone. They're never alone in this. So they have somebody assistance for as much or as little as they want.
And just to add to what Kathy said, I think what they bring, the element that the caregiver specialist brings to the family member, is that of trust. Many times these folks may not have the question right away, and that might come to them in the middle of the night, oh, I might need this, right? What about this? They have, the caregiver specialists have been working in developing a trusting relationship with the caregiver so that they can be consulted for anything. And it's that coaching aspect that allows people to feel comfortable to go to them for advice when many times they would choose not to go to a family member. They feel that the professional has a voice that's of reason and has certainly been trained, and that they can coach them in really identifying some of the concerns that they'd like to express.
Well, that's great. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, this is Lisa Miller. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I'm Lisa Miller. I'm a legislator up in Maine. Hi, everybody. I was wondering, Kathleen, and I don't know how these webinar things work. I'd love to print out your PowerPoint and run it by one of my home care advocates and just see how your policies align with ours in Maine. Can I do that off the webinar, or do you have a place where you're...
I can email you. Lisa, I can email you the presentation. It'll be posted,
Fabulous.
but I can email it to you today.
Okay, that'd be great. This has been very interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That would be great, and I think something that New Hampshire has, because we sit geographically between two wonderful states, Vermont and Maine, you know, if we could share this information, if we could actually even build upon this program, you know, incorporating the work of our two sister states, I think that would be very helpful, because we really complement each other geographically, and anything we could do to kind of facilitate that, New Hampshire would be honored to do.
Great.
Great. Are there any other questions? Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Kathy and Kathleen. And this, again, will be up on the web online, and you have their emails. You will be sorry you did that, Kathy and Kathleen. But it's that's what we're here for, is to share information. So thank you very much, and I will let everybody know when this is posted.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.